This video is sponsored by Classic Football Shirts, the best place to get your classic and vintage football shirts. To get cheap retro Palace shirts, click the link in the description below. And for an extra 10% off, use the code CFSPJ10 at checkout. Hello and welcome to the Crystal Palace podcast. I'm Alfonso Greenbrook, and in today's podcast I'll be looking over the game against Everton by bringing you my match review, player rankings and my man of the match. As well as this, I'm also going to be bringing you interviews with Roy Hodgson, Wilfried Zaha, Ruben Loftus-Cheek and Scott Dann after the game. So let's begin. Palace let their lead slip from their grasp twice at Selhurst Park, as David Arnold's Everton escaped from South London with a point. In a frantic first half, James McArthur gave the Eagles a dream start by scoring within the first minute, before Roy Hodgson's team were quickly pegged back by a controversial Leighton Baines penalty just 4 minutes later. Wilfried Zaha then scored his third of the campaign to once again raise hopes, but an Oumar Niasse strike just before the break ultimately got Everton a draw that they scarcely deserved, with the home side unable to find a way past Jordan Pickford in the second 45 minutes. Palace came into the game having not scored a home league goal against the Toffees since 1994, but it took them just 51 seconds to change that stat. Yohan Cabaye fed the ball to Ruben Loftus-Cheek on the edge of the box, who was handed too much time to get the ball out from under his feet, check back and get a shot away which was parried by Pickford, but only into the path of McArthur, who celebrated his return to the lineup by tapping home the rebound and hand his side the perfect start. But the feel-good factor quickly evaporated as Everton found a quick-fire equaliser just 4 minutes later, albeit in very controversial circumstances. Niasse burst into the box where he knocked the ball past Scott Dann, and despite minimal contact with the Eagles' captain, his legs crumpled under him. Anthony Taylor was dubbed into pointing to the spot, and as usual Everton's all-time record penalty scorer Baines made no mistake from 12 yards out to level things up. A sense of injustice quickly engulfed Selhurst Park, along with the driving rain, and it took the Eagles a while to get over that setback. Indeed, Niasse almost capitalised on it when he danced his way into the box and hit goalwards, but Speroni managed to get down low and push it away. But gradually the hosts began to build themselves back up, and McArthur forced Pickford into a save with 33 minutes gone. But 2 minutes later the old ground came alive again when Hodgson's team regained the lead with a well-worked move. McArthur spread the ball out to the galloping Joe Ward on the right flank, who delivered a fantastic low centre right into the corridor of uncertainty, and after it beat Pickford the ball was on the plate for Zaha to net for the third home game in succession. However, after the winger had been denied a spot kick after being bundled over in the box in what looked a more clear-cut claim than Niasse's, Palace's Achilles heel came back to haunt them again as they conceded late in the half to see their advantage slip through their fingers. Speroni did well to turn past the charging Oumar Niasse, but he fed a dangerous short pass into Dann. A slight hesitation by the defender was pounded on by Idrissa Gueye, and that allowed Gylfi Sigurdsson to slide in the chance to Niasse, and the Senegalese striker made no mistake, coolly tucking the unexpected opportunity away to punish the mistake. The Argentinian made up for his error a couple minutes after the restart, when Sigurdsson cut the ball back for half-time introduction Dominic Calvert-Lewin, who smashed goalwards, but Speroni showed great reactions to stick out a hand and push the ball away from danger, and then Dann headed wide of the mark after a corner as the game flowed from end to end. Unlike the weather conditions, the chances dried up after that, and so Hodgson induced the fit again Christian Benteke with 15 minutes to play, and he had a glorious chance to put Palace ahead for the third time when he was played through by Zaha, but when faced one-on-one with Pickford he squibbed his effort well wide of the mark. The Belgian did better with his second opportunity when he drilled a hammer of a shot from 25 yards out towards goal, but he came straight to Pickford who beat it away. And then in the dying embers, Luka Milivojevic nearly steered home a shot from the edge of the box, but once again the England international stopper was equal to it, to hand his team a share of the spoils. Crystal Palace remained bottom of the Premier League and 5 points adrift of safety after a 2-2 draw with Everton at Selhurst Park on Saturday. The Eagles led twice in the game but were pegged back by the visitors as the two sides shared the spoils in the open contest in S2E19. But what did we learn from the game at Selhurst Park? Here are 5 things. Number 1. What record? Everton came into the game having kept clean sheets on each of their last 4 visits to Selhurst Park, with Palace failing to score at home against the Toffees since they returned to the Premier League in 2013. But it took just 51 seconds for that to change, as James McArthur tapped home after Ruben Loftus-Cheek's effort was parried away by Jordan Pickford into his path. It was the fastest goal scored so far this season in the top flight, and Palace's second fastest in Premier League history. Number 2. They come in twos. Crystal Palace failed to score in their first 3 home matches this season, and before their victory against Chelsea last month, they had not scored in 5 of their previous 6 Premier League matches at Selhurst Park. But they have now scored 2 goals in each of their last 3 home games, the first time Palace have managed this feat in the Premier League. Number 3. England's newest star shines again. Ruben Loftus-Cheek impressed for England on his senior international debut last week against Germany, and he shone it again here for Palace despite being in injury doubt before the game with his back problem. He was involved in the opening goal as it was his shot that was parried by Pickford, whilst he was a constant threat for Everton with some surging runs forward from midfield. He was, however, on the receiving end of more than one of the 26 fouls committed by the visitors during the course of the game. Number 4. The pantomime villain. He came close to joining Crystal Palace in the summer, but Oumar Niasse was not the most popular man for Eagles supporters on Saturday. He was involved in the controversial award of a penalty for Everton, and was roundly booed by the home supporters thereafter, particularly when he scored the equaliser on the stroke of half-time. And after being booed, he was perhaps fortunate to stay on the pitch after committing more fouls, notably one on Yohan Cabaye in the second half, where Palace fans were screaming for a second yellow. And number 5. Palace could learn from their visitors. With the Eagles only picking up 1 point in this fixture, they have now just 5 points from their first 12 games of the season. Only one club has survived in the Premier League with 5 points or fewer at this stage of the season, Everton back in the 1994-95 season when they had only 4. So Palace will need to follow in their opponents' footsteps if they are to avoid a return to the Championship. So now I'm going to move on to the player ratings, but before I start, don't forget you can follow us on Twitter and Facebook at @Crystal for all the latest Palace news. And also, if you're on Facebook, do feel free to join our Facebook group, which is a really great place for you to join in with discussions and share your opinions with other fans. And also, if you are someone who likes to share your videos and photos from the game or any articles you found online and you do want to share them with other fans, then of course do join the Facebook group, because much like forums, it's a great place for you to share your opinion and for others to see them. Now, another great place to share your opinion is in the YouTube comments, so if you are listening to the podcast on YouTube, then do feel free to drop a comment below the video with your player ratings, rating the players out of 10, and that's 1 being the worst and 10 being the best. And you can do this along with your views from the game, so even if you don't want to put your player ratings, do feel free to comment your views on the game. Do you think it was a penalty? Do you think it was a dive? Should we have had a penalty? Anything like that you want to talk about in the game, do it in the YouTube comments below. And that's purely because other people who come to the video not only can listen to my opinion, but can also read what other fans thought. And also for myself, if I come back to the video, I can see what the guys listening, I can see what you guys think. And whether you're Everton fans or Palace fans, I like to read other people's opinion. But if you do want to find and follow any of these social media groups and pages, then do check all the links that will be in the description below. But enough of that, we're now going to move on to the player ratings, starting in goal with Speroni, who I'm going to give a 6. Made a good save low down to deny Niasse in the first half, and looked to be having a solid game before deciding to pass to Dann instead of clearing in the final seconds of the first half. Dann got robbed by Guy and fed in Niasse, who was unmarked, to roll it in. Jules' first mistake since regaining the gloves, to be fair, and he made a great save from Calvert-Lewin right at the start of the second half. So Speroni here, I've given him a 6, and much like his performances over the last sort of month or so since he's come back into the side, it was a very average performance from the Palace legend. And to be honest, since he's come into the side, unlike what Hennessy, obviously Hennessy's had loads of criticism, but he did play against the likes of Man City, Man United, teams that were having loads of shots and goals. Admittedly, Speroni's obviously come into the side and he hasn't been challenged as much as Hennessy has been. But Speroni, unlike what Hennessy's been doing this season, Speroni isn't making clear-cut errors which Hennessy has been doing. But to be honest, I'm not going to talk too much about the season as a whole, but I've given him a 6. It was a pretty average performance, and he started quite well in the game. Obviously, we took the lead quite early on in the game, but Niasse was being a hassle for the Palace defenders. Obviously, probably, in my opinion, Everton's biggest threat in the first half. Obviously, Niasse got through on goal. Speroni got down low to make a save from Niasse, so that was really early in the first half. So, in terms of what Hennessy does, or what Speroni does better to Hennessy, is the fact that Speroni makes that save. So rather than making one or two really great saves, but making loads of mistakes, Speroni makes crucial saves like this, which keep us in the game. And to be honest, obviously after that save and the stuff that he done in the first half, he looked like he was having a really great game, and that was until the last minute of the game, like the 47th minute. Obviously, we had a bit of added time, and instead of clearing the ball, he decided to pass it to Dann. Dann got closed down really easily. Guy got the ball off of him, and obviously Niasse got the ball and scored from that. But just to talk about that, really, obviously, it's allegedly Speroni's been told to keep it on the ground because there's no target man up front, which is a fair point. You don't want to clear the ball, even if you're in the last sort of few minutes of a half or a game. You don't want to clear the ball up, but if there's no one there, or B, if you're going to lose possession anyway. So that's a fair point. But if you look back at it, he's been playing so well throughout that half, passing it out from the back. But on this occasion, his sort of decision making was incorrect. Now, you could say it's obviously Dann's fault because Dann got dispossessed, and I'll go on to talk about Dann later on. But in terms of Speroni, he had Sacco, so he could have passed it out to Sacco. He could have passed it out to Jeffrey Slupp, or he could have, even passed it to Dann, and Dann should have done better with it. But there are, you could criticise Speroni for actually putting Dann in a position where, although he should have done better, he put Dann under some pressure. He could have passed to Sacco easily, or he even could have cleared the ball. So in that respect, you've got to put a little bit of blame on Speroni in terms of game management. Even if you've been told not to clear the ball because there's not a target man in the last few seconds of a half or of a game, if you're under danger, there's nowhere to go, then just clear it long, clear it into the stands, and even if it goes out for a throw-in, just make sure the team can defend that throw-in. But in terms of his performance, other than that mistake, which I find it really hard to explain because it's a bit of his fault for passing it to Dann, not passing it to Sacco, or not clearing it, but also it's Dan's fault because he got closed down so easily and dispossessed. But I'm going to put maybe, let's say 50-50, let's put it there. 50%, maybe 40% you could say is on Speroni, and then the rest of the fault is on Scott Dann. But to be honest, I've given him a 6 because bar that mistake, he made great, I wouldn't say great saves, but he made fine saves throughout the game, saves that kept us in the game, and quite notably the one from Calvert-Lewin. So Calvert-Lewin came off the bench for Everton, and within the first minute had a shot, Speroni saved it. So if that shot had gone in, would have been 3-2, a different story in the game. So the fact that Speroni, and this is something that he's better than Hennessy, the fact that he makes that save rather than making an error or palming it into the path of another player of the opposition, Speroni makes these saves which keep us in the game. But the reason I've given him a 6 is it was, once again, other than that mistake he made where he passed to Dann where he should have cleared it, or passed to Sacco, whichever way you perceive that mistake to be, other than that, really solid performance from him. Couple of fine saves here and there, and once again, even I've said this for the last few weeks now, Hennessy's now back fully fit, but at this rate, the way that Speroni's performing at the minute, I don't see no reason why he should be dropped from the team. But a 6 for the Palace legend. Now to move on to the right back, Joe Ward, who I'm going to give a 7. Found Lookman hard to cope with at times, but did provide Wilfried Zaha with an inch-perfect cross right between Keane and Pickford for the Palace striker to nod home. So Joe Ward here, I've given him a 7, and this is a player who have actually given quite a lot of criticism this season. But in this game, when I saw the lineup, I was really, really worried. I saw that Ward was back playing, I saw Fosu-Mensah on the bench, and I did question Roy Hodgson for making that decision, because although Ward was alright against Tottenham, I thought he wasn't the best, and I thought that Fosu-Mensah would have been the better player. But Joe Ward started at right back, and he proved me wrong. And I've got a group chat on Twitter, and we were talking about it before and after the game, saying how we were all worried about Ward, but actually in this game he gave us the one bit of quality which it would have meant we won the game. But the fact that he made that chance and he proved us all wrong was absolutely fantastic. So although Lookman, we know what of a great talent he is, obviously he did play for Charlton, so I'm not going to talk too much about that, but he did score against us last season, so he is a good English talent. But he, Joe Ward, we know he's not the fastest player, found it quite difficult to cope with Lookman quite a lot of the time. But put that aside, his defensive performance was great, and it was nothing particularly wrong in his performance. but the cross to Zaha was fantastic. It wasn't just inch perfect, the height of it was perfect, the weight on it was perfect. So all he done, Joe Ward picked the ball on the right hand side, ran down the left, obviously got a nice link up play between Cabaye and Andros to get the ball to Ward, found it to Ward, and he put in that cross. You know, if you look back at the replay, he got it right in between Pickford and Keane, so he got it to dip in so much that Pickford wouldn't be able to catch it or, you know, palm it away. And then obviously Keane, you know, he made sure that it wouldn't go too far deep, that Keane will be able to clear. So that the cross was absolutely fantastic. The height was good as well. Zaha didn't even have to move that much to, you know, get it in. Easy finish for him, ran into the box, had a shot there, so that was great as well. And the fact that he's been criticised quite a lot this season, and the fact that we've said that actually he hasn't been so good going forward, but in this game we were all worried, but the one time he did go forward and he weren't staying back and defending and keeping his game simple, the one time he went forward he delivered that fantastic pass. So if he can try and do that more every week, then I don't see why he needs to be dropped from the side. But in saying that, I still think he's the weak link in the side. He's one of the weaker players in our side, and to be honest, you know, I personally think that based on this season, Fosu-Mensah may be the better player, but if Ward can start to reintroduce crosses like that into his game and actually just keeping it simple defensively and going forward when he has to, if he can introduce this back into the game, then I don't see why he couldn't continue to play it right back this season. But Joe Ward, I've given him a 7, the highest rating I've given him this season, because once again it was alright defensive performance from him, kept Lookman quite quiet throughout the whole game, did manage to cope with him, and you know, the main reason for the 7 is that perfect cross to Wilfried Zaha. But Joe Ward, a 7 for him. Now to move on to the captain and centre-back Scott Dann, who I am going to give a 5. A seemingly strong start to the game dissolved and ended up with Dann giving Everton a goal right on half-time. He tried a backwards header to Speroni a few minutes before, which the Palace keeper wasn't ready for and rolled out for a corner, and then gave the grave error of turning into Guy after a short pass from the Eagles keeper. That resulted in an equaliser. Obviously gave away the penalty too, but we can't criticise him for that, as it would be harsh. So Scott Dann here, I've given him a 5, and this was one of Dan's off games, and when you consider how well he's been playing this season, he hasn't been fantastic, but in the last sort of 4 games where our performances have started to pick up, I personally thought he'd been one of the better players, and when you consider he was the captain, you could say really that he was pivotal to our improvement in form. And if you look at the game before the mistake he made, obviously for the penalty, which wasn't his mistake, I'll go on to talk about that, but the fact that he, you know, gave the ball to Guy, who passed to Niasse, if you take that away, I thought he started the game quite strongly, you know, but as soon as he got to the end of the half, he had that backwards header to Speroni, which had to go out for a corner because Speroni wasn't ready for it, and then he made that mistake where he got dispossessed. You know, he started to sort of, I don't know, lose it, let's say, at the end of the half. So he was playing so well, and then towards the end of the half, he sort of lost it and made 2 or 3 little errors, and one of them, obviously, we did get punished for. But when you consider how well he's been playing, I'm not going to criticise him too much, but I still think he should have really improved with his performance. But do comment below what you think about his performance and whether you do still think that he is the captain to take Palace forward. But I personally thought a really strong start to the game, probably one of the better players in the first sort of 20-30 minutes of the game. But like I've already said, he dissolved, he got worse as the game went on, put that bad backwards header to Speroni, and then obviously made that mistake. And I've talked about it a little bit with Speroni, saying that Speroni, obviously he passed it to Dann, which is fine, you're playing it from the back, but maybe because Dann wasn't in a lot of space, he still had space, but he wasn't in a lot of space, maybe Speroni should have passed it to Saka or cleared it. But then if you look back at the replays as well, I'm probably going to give 50 to 60% of the blame on Scott Dann, because he's a professional footballer. He should be able to do one-touch football. So if the ball comes to him, he should straight away not take 2 or 3 touches, stop it there, pass to Cabaye or pass to Joe Ward, whoever was on that side. Or if he felt uneasy with it, just pass it back to Speroni. Do the easy option. And, you know, if you ever do feel unsure as a defender, you always go back to your keeper. You don't try and lob it forward or try and dribble out of danger. If there's no way you can get forward or get the ball out of danger, then you pass it back. So in terms of that, Dann had a little bit of space, and he didn't have a lot of time, but he had time on the ball to think about it. But instead of thinking about it, he took too many touches, got dispossessed, and ultimately that was the equaliser for Everton. So really, that was sort of the turning point of his game, let's say, because after he made that mistake, he didn't really recover in the second half, and he sort of had a really down game, or really negative game, let's say, in the second half, and that's why I've given him the 5. It's purely because of the mistakes he made, and also just because of how it affected his game. But really, do comment below what you think about that mix-up. But personally, looking back at it, Speroni obviously either should have passed to Saka or cleared it long, or, you know, passed it to Dann, and then Dann should have passed it back, or Dann should have taken a touch and given it to Kabay, or passed it back. So there's all these different ways you could look at it, but in my opinion, Speroni, he's got to either clear it and you know, get it out of danger, or pass to someone who isn't, you know, being chased down by 2 or 3 players. So really, I've said this already, but I'm probably going to give, you know, 40% of the blame to Speroni because of that, and then, you know, the majority, so 60% of the blame on Scott Dann, purely because he, even though he was under pressure, he should have passed it back to Speroni, or just taken one touch and got rid of the ball either to Kabay or to Ward or whoever was on that side. But other than that mistake, like I said, a strong first half. Second half as well improved. Didn't improve, and that sort of brought the whole sort of his game down. But in terms of the penalty, you know, as I'm obviously recording this podcast a few days later than what I normally would do, but, you know, just a few hours ago, obviously on Tuesday it was announced that Niasse was going to be one of the first players, or he was the first player to be charged with simulation, so his dive for the penalty. And today on Wednesday, about 12 o'clock, they announced, the FA, that actually he's been charged with it. So although Everton and Niasse appealed it, they rejected the appeal, so now Niasse will get a 2-match ban. So although that's great, you know, he's been punished for his dive and for simulation and for deceiving the referee, as they call it. That's all great, but that doesn't mean anything to us. So it's obviously great for us, to the fans, looking at it and going, great, he's been punished, but that doesn't actually do anything for us. So we're not going to get them 2 points back. We're not going to, you know, not concede that goal, because it's happened in the past, and the rules say that only the player gets banned. And if anything, it will help the likes of West Ham, because Everton won't have a striker to play in that game. But in terms of that dive, it's absolutely horrendous, and I don't know how anyone can justify it being a penalty. It doesn't matter how much contact there was. If Niasse's running full pace at Dann, Dan's not just going to move out his way and let him run for a goal. Dan's obviously going to try and stand in front of him, and if Niasse runs into Dann and Niasse falls to the ground, it's not really Dan's fault. Yes, Dann, you could say, shouldn't be sticking out his shoulder, but then Niasse, he ran into Dann, and then obviously they hit shoulders, but for some reason Niasse hit the ground and acted like he's been shot in the foot. And if you look back at the pictures, it's absolutely horrendous. It's absolutely hilarious, to be honest, for me, because he's literally ran past Dann, got a little tug on his shoulder, and he's collapsed to the ground. Even though if you budge shoulders, you don't fall to the ground. So that was absolutely horrendous. And the fact that there's people trying to justify that is a penalty, you know, yes, there's contact on the box, but people touch shoulders from corners, from free kicks, so you can't really say that that's a penalty. And really, I just think it's an absolutely stonewall dive. And luckily, obviously I wouldn't say luckily for us, but at least he's being punished now, and, you know, it's been proved that he did dive. And hopefully, you know, in the next, you know, this season as a whole, not just for Palace, but any other player who dives, whether it be a Palace player or the opposition player, if a player dives, there's no need for it in the game, and they rightly do, you know, get the ban. So we could blame Dann for the fact that he stuck his shoulder out, but, you know, Niasse is the one who dived, ran into Dann. It wasn't like Dann stuck out a leg and he tripped him up. Literally, Dann and him brushed shoulders, and Niasse decided to fall to the ground, even though he's the one who ran into Dann in the first place. But Scott Dann here, you know, had a really strong start to the game, faded as the half went on, made that mistake by heading back to Speroni, made the error which meant that he got dispossessed for Niasse to score the goal. And obviously, he did concede a penalty, but I'm not really going to put too much blame on him. But a 5 for Scott Dann, not the best performance, and hopefully an improvement is to come from him in the next few games. Now to move on to his centre-back partner, Mamadou Sakho, who I am going to give a 6. Didn't really do anything wrong, to be honest, a solid performance. Well, except for that moment of madness that seemed to have happened once in the game, when he tried to dribble past Calvert-Lewin, lost it, and dragged the Everton man back for the clearest yellow card of the day. Actually had another mad moment in his own box, but managed to get it about clear. So Mamadou Sakho here, I've given him a 6, and once again, Mamadou Sakho, we saw how good he was last season, and once again, he's been pretty solid in this game once again. And unlike his partner in defence, Scott Dann, I thought that Mamadou Sakho didn't really have anything, we didn't do anything really wrong in the game, and that's why the word I used was solid. I think it was an overall quite a solid performance from him. So there really isn't really too much to talk about his performance, other than the fact that he was really solid defensively, winning headers, putting in blocks, doing what he's good at and what we expect from him. So overall, a good performance from that. But we know how maverick he can be sometimes. So there were a few moments of madness, let's call them, where there was one time where he tried to dribble past Calvert-Lewin. Obviously, this was late in the second half to try to dribble past him. Obviously, Calvert-Lewin got the ball off of him, and then obviously Sakho didn't want to, try and chase him and want Calvert-Lewin to go through and goal. So grabbed his shirt. That's fine. Taking one for the team after your mistake. That's fine. The clearest yellow card all day. But really, what you would expect Mamadou Sakho to do, and I would say this for any defenders, don't try and be all, make everything look pretty. If you have to get the ball past the player, don't try and dribble it and lose the ball and then have to make a foul and get a yellow card for it. Instead of that, just pass back to your keeper or pass back to your another defender, purely because you don't want to lose the ball. So in that occasion, he got away with it. He took the foul for the team, got the yellow card. But really, that moment of madness, that could have punished us, but luckily it didn't. And then there was another one where, we know how sometimes he's a bit sort of mad, let's say, in the box. So he has the ball, doesn't know what to do with it, and it looks like Everton might be able to capitalise. But obviously, that was all fine. He just about managed to get that clear. So although he was a bit mad, made a little bit of an error, he's still able to just about, not get it cleanly, but he just about managed to get it clear. So other than them two sort of moments of madness, I'm going to call them, where he obviously got that yellow card for trying to be too clever and having to get that foul and draw that foul back. Another for the fact that he almost lost the ball in his own box. I thought it was an overall, good game. And I suppose another way, I used the word solid. I think, as a whole, he was solid in defence. I think there's not really much more to say about him, other than the fact that he got caught in possession a few times and obviously had to haul down Dominic Calvert-Lewin. But overall, I think a 6 is a fair result for Sakho. Now to move on to the left-back, Jeffrey Slop, who I'm going to give a 6. Plenty of effort up and down, to be fair to him, but he didn't give Aaron Lennon many opportunities to get away from him. So Jeffrey Slop here, I've given him a 6, and when you consider in the last sort of few games he's been playing sort of in a midfield role, which we can't really distinguish whether it's attacking, defensive, or whatever his midfield role is, in this game he moved back to left back, and I thought he had an overall good game, and that's why I've given him a 6. And to be honest, the thing you could always guarantee with Jeffrey Slop is effort. So much like Andros Townsend, where he just continued going throughout the whole game, Jeffrey Slop showed that in this game. So there was plenty of effort up and down that left wing. And when you consider Aaron Lennon, he's been pretty good recently. Hasn't been scoring goals, but he's been a biggest attacking threat for Everton. When you consider Jeffrey Slop managed to, keep him quiet and limit him to as less opportunities as possible, you've got to give him credit there. And to be honest, this is something that reoccurs quite a lot with Jeffrey Slop. He may not be fantastic all the time, but he always puts in a shift. He always has a steady game, whether he's playing in midfield or at left back, as it was in this case. So Jeffrey Slop, I think a 6 is a fair result. Not really too much to say about his game defensively and offensively, other than the fact that he kept Aaron Lennon quite quiet throughout the game, limited him to as little opportunities as possible. And like I've already mentioned it was one of these games where once again we know we can rely on Jeffrey Slop, and he put in a steady shift again. But do comment below with what you thought about the defence. Obviously, whether you think it was Speroni's or Dann's fault for the goal, and whether you think Mamadou Sakho should have been more aware and not actually let Niasse, when he got the ball, let Niasse actually be onside. But do comment below any other views you have of the game. Now to move on to the defensive midfielder, Luka Milivojevic, who I am going to give a 7. Whatever you imagine to be a solid Luka performance, this was it. Although he spent most of the second half being fouled by Everton players, as much of the Palace side seemed to. So Luka Milivojevic here, I've given him a 7, and much like what I just said in that introduction, this was sort of your normal, your average, solid Luka performance. Since he came in last season, he's been a revelation at Palace, being one of our best players, bar sort of the attacking threats of Zaha and Townsend, and he always puts in a solid performance in front of the defence. And in this game, it was no different. It was, if you just imagine his performances last season, this was exactly it. He was good at stopping the attacks, making tackles, making blocks, and he was all over the place. And that was great in the first half, and overall he had a really good game. But then in the second half, he wasn't as involved as he would have liked to be as he was in the first half, and that's purely because Everton came out with a clear game plan in the second half to foul as many players as possible, disrupt the game. And when you consider, I believe Everton had 23 fouls but yet only 2 yellow cards, and Palace had about 5-10 fouls and got 2 yellow cards. When you consider that, and actually the referee just had a really terrible game, obviously giving the penalty away, then just, you know, double the amount of fouls and only the same amount of yellow cards. But, you know, we're not going to talk too much about it. But when you consider they came out, they were fouling players left, right and centre, and that happened to the whole team, not just Luka. But Luka was one of these players who he played so well in the first half by containing Everton. So in the second half, when he tried to do that, he didn't really have the chance to do that, purely because Everton were fouling players left, right and centre all over the pitch. But once again, solid defensive performance from him, you know, putting himself about over the pitch, covering quite a lot of ground. And something that I covered 2 weeks ago is the fact that he's one of these players now that, although he's really good defensively and will make that tackle, make that block, make that clearance, he's also now popping up, you know, it must be something that Hodgson's introduced, but he's popping up on the edge of the area, having shots, you know, from corners and set pieces. If the ball comes out to him, he'll try and have a shot. So clearly, it's not just his defensive work, which is great, he actually might have a great, you know, great shot on him. And when you consider, before he came to Palace last January, he actually scored maybe, I think it was 13 goals for Olympiacos at the beginning of that season, or maybe slightly less, but he scored quite a lot of goals for them from defensive midfield. So if he can bring that to his game, you know, onto his already great defending, that would just make him a whole lot of an even bigger better player. And, you know, I've given him a 7, and it's quite regular that I give him 7s, because much like Jeffrey Slubb, he's one of these players who always puts in a shift, always is fantastic for the team. And the thing that he's got up, you know, got on other than Jeffrey Slubb is the fact that Luka's just got a little bit more quality than Slubb has. So when Luka has a fantastic game, it's much better than when Slubb has a good game, purely because of just Luka's got that little bit more class and technique about his game. But other than his overall great performance, he was booked for a foul on Niasse in the first half. Obviously Niasse was being a hassle, made that tackle, got booked, and, you know, you've always got to be cautious when you're on a yellow card. Luka done exactly that, even though he's being fouled, didn't get angry over it. So that, you know, in terms of not getting angry, game management, that was fantastic. And to be honest, like he always is, he was busy in the midfield, got stuck in, and done what he had to do for the team. So once again, Luka Milivojevic, I think a 7 is a fair result. Now to move on to Yohan Cabaye, who I am going to give a 7. Everywhere again. Had his moments in midfield and played the ball to Loftus-Cheek for the opener. But he had a couple of good opportunities to shoot, which he could have done better with. So Yohan Cabaye here, I've given him a 7, and much like Luka, in terms of winning that midfield battle, that midfield partnership of Cabaye and Luka was everywhere again, and especially Cabaye more so than Luka, purely because Cabaye was playing a little bit more offensive than Luka was. But in terms of how they were playing in that midfield and how they won that midfield battle, I thought they were everywhere, all over the pitch. And when you consider Cabaye, we know he's getting on a bit now. People may argue that his legs are going. I didn't see that in this game, and I thought, in terms of this game, in terms of the players on the pitch, I actually thought he had his moments in the midfield. So there was a few sort of sparks of quality from him, whether it be finding a pass over the top, whether it be his set pieces from corners, from free kicks, all of this stuff. I thought that in moments throughout the game, he looked to be creating great opportunities, and that's none more so than the ball he played to Loftus-Cheek. So obviously Loftus-Cheek didn't score, but that pass from Cabaye to get the ball to Loftus-Cheek, lovely bit of skill in the box, had a shot. Obviously Pickford deflected it right into the path of McArthur, and McArthur scored. But the fact that Cabaye had that eye, was able to, you know, play the ball perfectly to Loftus-Cheek, and I'll go on to talk about Loftus-Cheek later on, but the fact that Loftus-Cheek finished, or almost finished it off, and McArthur finished the rebound off, but the fact that Cabaye was able to find Loftus-Cheek in that space in the box was great as well. And actually, you know, although he was looking to create for his teammates, there are a few, you know, really great opportunities which we know he'd like to score from, where he could have had chances to shoot, whether it's a confidence thing or whether it's the fact that he's been told not to shoot from the edge of the box. Whatever it would be, he had so many great opportunities. I wouldn't say great, maybe good. He had quite a lot of good opportunities to score, which really, even if he's told not to shoot, he should have really done better with them, whether that be spreading the ball out wide or doing what he'd done for our first goal and actually get the ball to someone like Loftus-Cheek in the box again. But Yohan Cabaye, I've given him a 7, an absolutely fantastic performance from him again. He was everywhere on the field, getting involved defensively, you know, going forward offensively, putting balls like he did to Loftus-Cheek, trying to create chances. And in terms of the game as a whole, him and Luka as a partnership, they did totally win the midfield battle. So in terms of his game, I think a 7 is a fair result. And if you do listen on to the later part of the podcast, I'll also talk about my man of the match, and I would say that Johan Cabaye is up there with one of the best players from this game. Now to move on to James McArthur, who I am going to give an 8. A hustling and bustling performance from the Scot, who opened the scoring after just 51 seconds. His third goal of the season to make him joint top scorer with Zaha. Taken off for Benteke with 15 minutes to go. So James McArthur here, I've given him an 8, and what more is there to say than the fact that he scored the goal within the first minute of the game, and to be precise, he scored it on 51 seconds. So the fact that he's come back from injury, hasn't really been involved in the side, the fact that he came back into the side, not only did he score, but he actually scored within the first minute, is just credit to how well he's got back, and the fact it's also credit to how he got his positioning to actually get into the box in the first place. But the words you heard in the introduction that I used to describe his performance were hustling and bustling. I think that's a great way to really describe his performance, and I've seen quite a lot of people using them sort of words to describe how he plays, and personally it's a really great way to describe it. Hustling, bustling, he was making a nuisance of himself offensively, going back and defending and helping Luka and Cabaye out, so he was doing everything what you would expect a central midfielder to be doing. And even though he was playing out wide at times and he was playing down the middle, even though he was changing positions throughout the game, I thought, like I said, hustling and bustling, I thought his performance was really great. And when you consider that he opened the scoring after just 51 seconds, it just proves how well he started the game. Sometimes you get players who take maybe 5-10 minutes to actually get into the game, but the fact that he was able to see that run from Loftus-Cheek, thought Loftus-Cheek was going to score, but the fact that he was able to get his feet positioned right, time his run perfectly to actually get on the end of that and score past Pickford is absolutely a credit to him. And when you consider our goal tally, so our top scorers this season, that was his third goal, so he obviously scored 2 in the League Cup against Ipswich, I believe it was, but he's now scored this goal as well, so that's his third goal of the season, making him joint top scorer with Zaha. So that just proves that although he's been missing through injuries throughout this season, he's still got that impact, the fact that he's got 3 goals in his joint top scorer with Wilfried Zaha. So the fact that he came on, hasn't played for quite a lot of this season, came back from injury, came back into the side, even though playing slightly out of position, scored the goal, had a really great overall performance. And I suppose the word you could use was busy in the midfield. And obviously he was taken off for Benteke with about 15 minutes to go. That's purely because we were trying to go for it, trying to get that third goal, which would probably at that point would have won us the game. Obviously bring Benteke on, I'm going to talk about him later, but that just gave us a little bit more of a point to our attack. So instead of just us pumping the ball forward and thinking either Wilf or Andros is going to get on it, we just brought Benteke on purely to have a point. Not because McArthur was playing badly, it's just purely because although McArthur had a really committed performance, he'd just come back from injury and he's not really fully 100% fit, let's say, because he did look a bit tired towards the end of the game. So take him off, put a point in the attack, and that didn't really, him coming off despite McArthur's great performance, didn't really affect how the end of the game went. But do comment below what you think about his performance. But personally for me, I think an 8's a fair result, and when you consider he hasn't really played much this season, this performance shows how crucial he may be for the team going forward. Now to move on to Loftus-Cheek, who I am going to give a 9. Bossed it from start to finish, no sign of injury or lack of confidence. So Ruben Loftus-Cheek here, I've given him a 9, and once again it was an absolutely fantastic performance from the England international. But before I go on to talk about his performance, I must say, you've probably seen the video on the channel by now, but he absolutely bossed it for England. So obviously Gareth Southgate was trying to experiment with the team, brought in a few players who you wouldn't normally expect to play, and everyone was slating him for that. But Loftus-Cheek was one of the players who actually come out with any praise from that England game, purely because he got given his chance and he took it with both hands and he absolutely played. He was the best player. He won man of the match. He was the best player for England on that day. And he's, even though he had the injury in I think it was the Brazil game, even though he had his injury in that game, he came back to Palace from international duty. He didn't look like he had the injury, so he's obviously overcome that. No lack of confidence, so he's carried on that confidence from that England game into the Palace game, and his performance was absolutely fantastic, and that's why I've given him a 9. And when you consider, like I've said, how well he played for England, he once again impressed here again. And this is, obviously it's all great and seeing him play really well, but here's, we've got to cherish it whilst it lasts, because if he keeps playing like this, he'll go back to Chelsea and probably play for them. But his performances for us at the minute are absolutely fantastic, and hopefully now, like he got in this game against Everton, he got that chance to score, Obviously, great save by Pickford. Well, not great save, but a great block. But then it was in the wrong place. But the fact that he was able to now put up his good performances and link that with goal-scoring chances like that time he got into the box. Now he's starting to add that to his game since the good performances we've seen at the beginning of the season. That's just overall going to, improve his game. And if you look back at this game against Everton, like what he was doing against Germany, he was making surging runs forward. And when you consider his shot led to the goal, you've got to give him credit for that as well. So not only was he good in terms of surging forward and having that confidence to carry the team and help Zaha and Townsend with the attacks, he's also actually got the assist and actually led to us scoring the opening goal within the first 51 seconds of the game. So in terms of his performance, absolutely fantastic. And much like what I said with Cabaye, he'd be one of the high players, or he was one of the high players on my list for the Man of the Match award. So do comment below what you think about his performances, whether you do think that if we stay up, we could consider signing him permanently, because we said that about Sakho. We weren't going to sign him, we ended up doing it. So maybe if we do stay up, I'm not saying we will stay up, but let's say we do stay up and Loftus-Cheek continues to perform as he is at the moment, could there be a small chance that he wants to stay at Palace? Because a player like him, with the skill he's got, with the ability and the fact that he can control a game, a player like him is absolutely fantastic to have. But Loftus-Cheek, a 9 for him. Now to move on to the attacker, Wilfried Zaha, who I'm going to give a 6. Scored again. Was a constant thorn in Everton's side all afternoon, but often tried to do a little bit too much. In all fairness, he came up against a very impressive young John Joe Kenny at right back. So Wilfried Zaha here, I've given him a 6, and once again, the star talisman of Palace this season has once again scored again. And when you consider that he actually didn't have a fantastic game, the fact that he scored again just shows how great of a player he is. And when you consider that the goals he scored for us this season, how important they've been, this one here was absolutely, it could have been important if obviously Everton didn't go on to score that penalty. But the fact is, the fact that he can score a goal when he's not playing his best just shows that when he is on his day, he's going to be 10 times better than he was in this game. And I've said this already, and I've said this to quite a lot of mates of mine. The fact that Zaha scores when he has an off game just shows how great of a player he is. You've got the likes of Hazard and Alexis Sanchez, Harry Kane, that even when they have an off game, they're not fantastic, they can still chip in with a few goals here and there. The fact that Zaha, despite not having a good game, scored just shows the class that he's got there. And to be honest, although he didn't have a fantastic game, he was still a constant threat for Everton. All afternoon they were struggling to deal with the pace. But to be honest, you've got to give credit to the young right back John Joe Kenny. Obviously, he's come into the side with a few injuries for Everton, and John Joe Kenny looks to be a great youngster, because I thought, when you consider how well and how informed Zaha's been recently, I thought that Kenny dealt with Zaha really well. So if anything, yes, Zaha had an off game, but that's purely because the youngster John Joe Kenny played so well against him. And if it weren't for Kenny playing as well as he did, maybe Zaha could have had even more opportunities, because he still was a threat, but not as big as he normally was. But in terms of the goal, I've already talked about it with Joe Ward. Great cross from Ward in between Pickford and Keane. Lovely dip on it, lovely curl, lovely height. But then Zaha as well, you've got to give him credit, because he was involved in passing the ball to Andros, to Cabaye, to Ward again. So he was involved, and he saw that Ward was going to put that cross in, so he sprinted into the box, and he was in the right place at the right time. So he managed to time his run perfectly, get in the end of it. And when you consider how many players there were in the box, how fast the cross was coming in, the fact that he connected it with it right perfectly with the outside of his foot, it was an easy finish for him. But if you add up all the different things in terms of running into the box, timing it right, he got everything superb. He got everything right in terms of scoring that goal. So it was great for him to score the second goal. Obviously, it was unlucky. Well, I would say it was unlucky that we obviously conceded a penalty because the ref was blind. But also, it's our mistakes at the back. So we could have gone in 2-1 at half time. Wilfried Zaha's goal could have been the goal, obviously, to win us the game. But like I've said already, although he was fantastic in terms of getting that goal, timing his run, hitting it perfectly, we would have seen the Zaha of a few seasons ago would have volleyed that over. But when he saw that one in, when he saw that ball come in, he stayed composed outside of the foot finish. A lovely goal there. But it just shows how good of a player he is, that even though when he doesn't have the most effective game, isn't playing the best game, he can still go forth and play so well. But Wilfried Zaha, a 6 from him. Do comment below what you think about his game overall, and whether you do think he even if you think he does deserve to get the 6, whether you think that because I gave McArthur a 7, maybe I should give Wilfried 7, but Wilfried Zaha, I think a 6 is a fair result for him. Now to move on to his attacking partner, Andros Townsend, who I am going to give a 6. Plenty of effort, but no reward today. So Andros Townsend here, there isn't really too much to say about his performance, because much like Wilfried Zaha, he didn't really have the most effective performance, but you can never put any, you can't really criticise Andros Townsend for never putting in any effort, because in this game, you've got to put praise on him, because he put in loads of effort, was trying to run down them flanks, trying to get the ball in the area, but it's quite obvious for me that as soon as Benteke comes back in, we need to move Townsend straight back out wide, because he isn't really playing that well in that forward role than we saw against Chelsea. And I believe Chelsea was a one-off, because most teams don't play 3 at the back, so playing 2 strikers against a 3 at the back is great, but in the last few games, with playing against teams with back fours, Andros Townsend doesn't quite fit into playing in that striker role, but he put in the effort, he was making them runs, but he got no reward. So he obviously hasn't scored yet this season, but he's got an assist and he's created chances, I believe. Or I believe he's got the assist and he's created chances, but he still puts in the effort, which is great to see. And much like Jeffrey Slupp, it's very rare that he has an off game where he's absolutely terrible, and when he always puts in effort, tries to do his best, and it's a steady performance. The word I used to describe Slupp's performance was steady, and I suppose you could say Townsend's was as well, because he didn't do anything fantastic, but he done on the right game. And to be honest, it wasn't his best game for Palace, and that's why I've given him a 6. He wasn't as an sort of an attacking threat as he used to be, but in this game, obviously he didn't really have any chances, but he didn't get the reward for it. So he put in effort, didn't get anything from it. His end product, you could argue, was quite lacking in this game. And then there was a few chances that when he did get the chance, and this is why he didn't have an overall good game and didn't get a reward for his efforts, is purely because there was a few chances where he just hit them over the bar, quite frustratingly, because normally that'd be an easy shot or easy cross for him. And then there was a few set piece deliveries, whether it be a corner or a free kick, that when he put the delivery in, it was quite poor. So when you consider how good he has been and how much of an attacking threat he can be, if you add that to his effort, he could be an absolutely fantastic player for us this season. But every so often you have an off game, so although he put in effort and I've given him a 6, he still had a quite off game. So obviously not his best game for Palace, but hopefully with him moving out wide now, with Wilf on the other wing and Benteke moving now, so he can actually so Townsend has actually got a target for his crosses. Hopefully that will improve his whole game. But Andros Townsend, I think a 6 is a fair result. Now to move on to the subs, Christian Benteke and Jason Puncheon. So Christian Benteke, I'm going to give a 5, not because I thought he had a bad game, purely because when he did come on the pitch, he didn't have as big of an impact that we would have liked. He didn't score the goal, and he actually came on from McArthur. Obviously, he's had 8 weeks out with injury, so you can expect him to be a bit rusty, and he was more than a bit rusty. He was completely rusty. His first chance, lovely feet by Zaha, fed the ball to Benteke. He dragged the shot wide, so that was the first chance. And then there was another one where he had a volley. It was a really great volley, he connected with it beautifully, but he shot straight at Pickford. So the 2 chances he had coming off the bench, he took one of them alright, and the other one he completely fluffed. And you can understand, obviously with him being a little bit rusty, obviously having 8 weeks out with injury, but he's an important player for us, and he needs to, step up his fitness really, really quickly, because we need a player like him quite, we need him now, because we haven't been scoring enough goals, and we need to bring back our striker and get him all guns blazing, because if we are to get out of this relegation battle, we need players like him to start firing again. But to be honest, if you look at his performance, the reason I've given him a 5 is he did look like someone who'd been out for 8 weeks, so we didn't really expect him to come back all guns blazing and be fantastic, but it was slightly disappointing. But hopefully over the next sort of few weeks, obviously building his fitness up again, his match fitness, hopefully he can improve even further. And then in Jason Puncheon, I'm not really going to give him any rating, because he came on for the last few minutes, didn't really have any time to make an impact, and even in that time he didn't make any impact at all. So he came on for goodbye. No real impact there. But the subs, unlike the last few weeks, we actually had good subs on the bench, but it's just the fact that the team who were playing from the start played quite well, and the only reason Puncheon and Benteke came on is purely because McArthur and Kabay were getting quite tired towards the end of the game. But hopefully in the next few weeks, with a few more players coming back from injury, hopefully our substitutes bench and the first team can become even stronger again. But just to talk about the game just a bit of a summary. You know, we did look like we were going to get a destined win because it was a really great performance again. And to be honest, there was inept refereeing decision, really bad refereeing decision. You know, given that penalty, you know, giving away 23 fouls but only 2 yellow cards to Everton. You know, there's little point really for us bemoaning about the referees. There's no really point of us moaning about them because we had enough chances for us to actually take the lead. And you could say that even though the referee made a bad decision and, you know, made the game 2-2 really, because it was his fault for the penalty. So even though the referee's fault for making it 2-2, we had our own chances, we made our own errors, and really we deserved the 3 points. We should have got the 3 points, but because of our inability to take our chances and the fact that we made that little error to literally gift Everton a goal, that's a really bad thing to see. But as Big Sam said, you know, he said this quite a lot when he was Palace manager, respect the point. We've done exactly that here. You know, Roy Hodgson has obviously come in. He's starting to get the team playing to their strengths again. We're starting to dominate games now, which is fantastic. And hopefully, it's only a matter of time before sort of our performances are getting rewarded. So we're putting in good performances now. We're playing really well, creating attacking chances. We're finally scoring goals now. It's just a matter of time before our good performances get rewarded. And in the next 7 games, hopefully these good performances will turn to wins. And when you consider the stat that we've never, in the Premier League, or since we've come up from the Championship, we've never played 3 consecutive home games and actually scored 2 goals in all of them. That just shows how our performances are improved, and the fact that we've broken our own record by actually scoring 2 goals in consecutive home games. But once again, really disappointing performance in the fact that we didn't get the result we needed. It was really disappointing the fact that obviously the referee played bad and Niasse dived. Really disappointing there, but the performances are good signs. We're seeing that the team is slowly improving, but it's now the next 7 games are really important. So it's now we need to start turning these great dominant performances into the result that we deserve. So now I'm going to move on to the Man of the Match award. But before I do that, I give you my Man of the Match and who I thought had the biggest influence in the game. And now I'm going to give you the 4 nominations I put forward for the award. Now, after a game where you do draw the game, you scored 2 goals, it had a really great performance. It's pretty hard to pick a Man of the Match because overall I thought the team performance was pretty great, and there's no player in particular you can put a lot of blame on or you can praise so much, because it was a great team performance as a whole, and the whole team worked together, and that's obviously something that Roy Hodgson's been working on. But in terms of the game as a whole, if I do have to pick 4 people, it will be 4 midfielders in particular. So I'm going to pick 4 midfielders, and that's personally just because I thought that Palace, we won that midfield battle. You know, in terms of controlling the game, I thought we'd done that really well, and I say this quite a lot every week. I say that games are won and lost in the midfield, and if you win the midfield battle, you'll control the game, go on to win the game. Obviously we were unlucky with a penalty decision not to win the game, but we did control the midfield in the game. So the 4 players I've put forward are James McArthur, Luka Milivojevic, Jan Kabay and Ruben Loftus-Cheek. But in terms of all of these players, they were solid in terms of that midfield battle. They won that, they controlled that area of the pitch. In terms of James McArthur, he scored the goal. He was very good at putting pressure on the opposition. Had a few shots as well, which was saved and parried away by Pickford. So other than scoring the goal, he had a really great impact on the game. And even though he's just come back from injury, I thought he came into the side out of position and still done a job there. You know, made sure he could put that high press, go back defensively and attack. So he'd done everything you would want a sort of central midfielder to do. Luka Milivojevic, once again, we know how good he is defensively. He was solid defensively in this game, and there were a few chances, especially at the end of the game, where he had a shot and it was saved by Pickford. So once again, not only being solid defensively, but giving a little bit going forward as well. In terms of Jan Kabay, this guy, in terms of our overall play, other than if you take goal scoring out of it, in terms of overall play, Jan Kabay has been one of the most consistent players in the last 4 games. He obviously made that mistake against Tottenham, but played alright in that game. He's played well in the last, 3-4 games. And in terms of this game, done exactly the same again. Controlled the game, great passing, a few, great set pieces. So once again, good contribution there. And in terms of Ruben Loftus-Cheek, we know how good he is, but even though he had that injury, he made loads of powerful runs going forward. He'd cut inside the box, have shots, He had the shot, which obviously got deflected into McArthur, so he actually created that chance and got the assist. Obviously, great cut inside, great shot. McArthur was able to score from the rebound. So in terms of that, that was great. But take that away, take that assist, he was great as well. You know, like I said, making powerful runs, getting in the area, trying to be that attacking threat. And all of these players, although they're not all playing in an advanced role, I still thought in terms of that midfield battle, they still had an attacking threat. So the fact that Loftus-Cheek got the assist, the fact that McArthur scored the goal, the fact that Cabaye was going forward, putting set pieces in, and the fact that Milivojevic, even though he's playing in defensive midfield, if he has to go forward, he can have shots from the edge of the area and obviously, test the keeper. But in terms of who I thought the best player was, it's really hard for me personally to pick one when you consider how good, in particular, these four players played. And if you look on Twitter, look on the BBS, there is a lot of debate whether it be McArthur, Milivojevic, Cabaye, Loftus-Cheek, even Zaha. And I didn't put Zaha there because, obviously, other than the goal he scored, I don't think he was fantastic in this game. But in terms of this game, I'm probably going to give it to Luca. So congratulations, Luca. You win the Man of the Match award for the game against Everton. And the only reason I've given it to him above, say, Cabaye and Loftus-Cheek, who I thought done really, really well, is purely because of how good he was defensively. So the fact that he broke up play whenever Everton, got a chance going forward. The fact that he had these chances going forward, his passing was great again. So the only reason I've given it to Milivojevic, other than, say, Cabaye and Loftus-Cheek, is purely because of that defensive attribute as well. But, it was a really close contest, and I could have picked any four of these players. But overall, a great team performance, but Luca, for me, was the standout player. So now you've heard my match report, player rankings, and my man of the match. That concludes this week's podcast. Now I've got an exclusive interview with Roy Hodgson, Wilfried Zaha, Ruben Loftus-Cheek and Scott Dann following the game.
Well, for a bit of a different feeling after this 2-2 draw compared to the last one here at Selhurst, does it feel like 2 points dropped?
Yeah, definitely. I feel like we battered them, but we just got to be clinical. We can't play that well and not finish teams off. So it feels like a game lost to me, to be honest, but I'll take the point.
It was a great start, wasn't it? And then their goal, it's fair to say it was a soft penalty, wasn't it?
Yeah, it was, but you shouldn't give the referee that opportunity to give them a pen, to be honest. But yeah, it was definitely soft, but just got to carry on.
Although, did get a point, is this a really important run of games coming up just to keep picking up points?
Yeah, that's the main thing. To be honest, it's good that we didn't lose, because that would have killed a lot of people's confidence today. So yeah, picking up points every game is going to be a big thing for us, so we just need to really carry on.
Ruben, it's been quite a week or so for you, hasn't it?
Yeah, it has. But for me, it was just about forget what happened on the international break and focus on the game today. And I think we did really well. We're all really pleased with it. It's just we didn't get the win.
Yeah. Really, because I thought you actually seemed to bring a lot of the confidence that you took from England into the Palace performance today, didn't you?
Yeah, well, personally, I feel the more I'm playing, the better I'm getting better and better each game, and I'm working hard to get fitter, and starting to feel really good and feel fit. So I'm just trying to give my best every game.
So what is this little back issue that you've got that Gareth Southgate was telling us about the other day that you're trying to manage? Is that right?
Yeah, I've had a lot of back problems, my lower back, since I was 16. And it's just been about managing that. And, since I haven't been playing for so long, it gives me problems here and there. So, and the other day it was a fatigue-related thing. So, I had a game at Wembley against Tottenham, and then 5 days after, against Germany, and then 5 days after. So I've never done that in my life. So it was difficult, and I started to feel pain and in my back, in the muscles. So it just seized up. So it's just about resting it and trying to get ready for today, and thankfully I felt all right.
And obviously this has become a little bit of an issue with Phil Jones getting injured for England. But from your point of view, you obviously wanted to play for England.
Yeah, definitely. As it was my first few caps, definitely I want to be on the pitch every time and play as much as I can. And I think it's just about trying to build that robustness to be able to play, every Saturday and sometimes, cup in a week. So for me, I've got to push through this as well, and that's what I'll try and do.
Just a thought on today, you feel that you should have won it, yeah?
Oh yeah, 100%. I think we took it to Everton today. We had most possession and we played some really good football. And it was just we were all gutted that we didn't get the 3 points because we feel we deserved it. But you don't always get what you deserve in football, so we go again.
Having led twice at home, must be a bit disappointed.
Yeah, bitterly disappointing, especially when the man of the goals, obviously he didn't create too many chances, and we were the better team throughout. So to end up with just a draw is obviously really disappointing.
There was a lot of consternation about that first goal, the penalty. What was your feeling on it?
I mean, straight away, I didn't think it was a pen. I'd obviously have to see it again. The ref seemed to think it was. I was adamant it wasn't. Like I say, I can't really comment too much, and I'll have to watch it again. On
the positive side, the manager said in his pre-match press conference he wanted you to be a little bit more clinical in front of goal. You were that today, 2 goals scored.
Yeah, we was. That's what we haven't been in recent weeks, and we was today, which makes it even more disappointing to not win the game. We done more than enough to win that game, 2 goals, and like I say, to come off 2-2 is disappointing. It's
an important period for the club. Stoke, Brighton and West Brom, the next 3, a great chance really to climb that table, start moving up there.
Yeah, I mean, every game's a chance to kick-start the season and start putting more points on the board. We've got a point today with the performance we put in. We should have had 3. Obviously, like I say, the way we conceded the goals was disappointing, but we have to dust ourselves down and go again and keep trying to get that win.
What's the feeling after that one? Are you pleased to have picked up a point or disappointed not to have got all 3?
Well, what would you think there? What would be your... If you were in my position, what would you say?
I would say you're disappointed not to get all 3.
Yeah, I think so, yeah. I think when you play as well as that, and you concede the 2 goals we conceded, one of which was a penalty which we don't think was one, and the second one a gift, of course, late in the first half, in added time in the first half. I don't think anyone watching the game, at least who's got any idea of what football is, could doubt or even contest that we were clearly the better team from start to finish. I thought our attacking play was good. We won the ball back very quickly. We played virtually the whole game in their half of the field. But it's 2-2 and it's 1 point, and that's no good to us because we need 3 points. We got 1 point against West Ham after dominating that game. We got no points against Newcastle and Tottenham after playing very, very well and deserving, as everyone said after the game, that we should have had some points. But that story, unfortunately, doesn't interest me too much anymore, and I won't be able to hide my disappointment or my regret that good performances are not giving us any points. And there'll be a time when we can't give these good performances. So how are we going to get points then? If our good performances and doing everything right and dominating games and looking by far and away the better team than our opponents gives us no points, what happens when we start to play badly?
Have you been in this kind of situation before as a manager where as a team you're playing well and not getting up points? And if so, what's the kind of thing you need to turn it around?
Well, I mean, I don't know that you do turn it around. I mean, basically speaking, what turns things around are not conceding goals when you defend and scoring goals when you attack. And at the moment, we're not conceding very many chances, if any. Once again, today, there wasn't a save in the game that Julian made that, wasn't totally and utterly savable, and had very few contacts with the ball. Julian Speroni, was nowhere, not called upon to make saves. And at the other end, it's a constant barrage of attacks and a constant barrage of efforts at the other end of the field. And we've had to work very hard for those 2 goals. And under normal circumstances, that would have won it for us. But there's no answer to that question. The big question is going to be: will the players retain their belief? Will the players retain their faith? Will they realise that their performances are good? Will they believe that there is justice and that if you play well and you're better than the opponents, you deserve to win and you will win? Now that's a question I can't answer. I will continue to believe that. I will continue to have faith. But it's the 11 players who represent the club on the field that have to have that faith and belief, have to keep it going.
So there you have it. Now you've heard what Roy Hodgson, Wilfried Zaha, Ruben Loftus-Cheek and Scott Dann had to say after the game. That concludes this week's podcast for the game against Everton. But make sure to come back next week for a post-match review of the game against Stoke City. So thanks for listening and remember to up the Palace!